I never thought I'd have to deal with this again. My name's Emma, and I'm 26. I've spent the past few years building my life and finally achieving the peace I craved. My own apartment, no roommates, no family drama. That is, until my mom told me something that completely flipped everything upside down. I was sitting in my living room, sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone when the phone call came in. It was a Saturday morning, and I was still in my pajamas, just trying to enjoy a quiet weekend. I wasn't expecting anything big, maybe a grocery list from my mom, a random family update, or something trivial. But this call was anything but. "Hey, honey," Mom's voice sounded a little too casual, like she was about to say something she knew would make me angry. "What's up?" I replied, trying to sound as relaxed as I could. "Well, we've been talking, and we think it's time your brother moved in with you," she said nonchalantly, like this was a perfectly normal request. "He's going through a rough patch, and it's just temporary, of course." I froze. Jake, my younger brother, the one who's never had to take responsibility for anything in his life, the one who's always bailed out by mom and dad at the slightest sign of trouble, the one who ruined everything for everyone just by existing in our house. And now, mom was telling me he was moving in with me? I couldn't hold back the frustration that bubbled up in my chest. "Wait, what? You're kidding, right? Why doesn't he stay with you guys?" "Sweetie, you know we have our hands full," she said, as though that explained everything. "And your apartment is the perfect size for him. It'll only be for a few months, tops." I bit my lip, trying not to scream. "Mom, I didn't agree to this. I live alone because I need space. I didn't sign up for this." Her tone didn't change. "Emma, it's just for a little while. You'll be fine. It'll be good for you to have family around." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like I was being cornered. There was no room for discussion here. No negotiation. The decision had already been made for me. "I'll start preparing the guest room," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thank you, sweetie," Mom said, her voice filled with relief. "You're such a good sister. Jake will be so happy." I ended the call with a tight smile, trying to breathe through the sudden wave of anger flooding my chest. Jake had been given everything his whole life. No consequences for his actions, no responsibilities, just constant handouts from mom and dad. And now, I was expected to take him in as though everything was perfectly fine. I couldn't let this happen. Not in my space. Not in my home. Over the next few days, the anger didn't subside. Every time I walked into the guest room and looked around, I could feel my blood boiling. I hated the idea of him living here. Jake would take over everything, eat all my food, leave his stuff everywhere, and still expect me to take care of him like I always did when we were kids. Then, the worst part of it all came. On Thursday morning, when I was still trying to wrap my head around the situation, I saw my mom's name pop up on my phone again. "Hey, sweetie," she said in a cheerful tone, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. "I just wanted to let you know, we made a copy of the spare key for Jake. He'll need it to get in when you're not around." I could feel my stomach drop. "What? You gave him a key already?" My voice cracked, and I could feel my grip tightening around my phone. "Well, of course, honey. He'll need access when you're at work or out with friends. It's just easier that way." I couldn't believe this was happening. My parents had already planned it all out. They'd given him the key before even asking me. My personal space, my home, wasn't mine anymore. It was being handed over without a second thought. The old Emma would have just sucked it up, let things slide, and kept quiet. But not this time. Not anymore. I put my phone down, stood up, and walked over to the front door. The spare key was hanging there on the hook where I always kept it. I stared at it for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I knew what I had to do. Without a second thought, I grabbed the spare key and walked to the lock. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. If Jake was going to have a key, I was going to make sure he earned it. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust my parents to protect my space, my boundaries. It wasn't about being petty or spiteful. It was about maintaining some sense of control over my life. I got a new set of locks and changed them that afternoon. I'd already found a locksmith who could come over quickly. The feeling of power when the new locks clicked into place was something I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't the same as just getting angry and letting it fester. This time, I was taking action. I was protecting what was mine. As the day went on, I kept thinking about how I'd explain this to my mom. I knew she wouldn't understand. She'd probably call me selfish or accuse me of making things harder than they had to be. But I didn't care. This was my home. And if I had to fight for it, I would. The next morning, Jake was supposed to show up. My mom called to confirm he was on his way, and I could hear the excitement in her voice as she talked about how great it would be for us to spend time together. I didn't say anything. I simply replied, "Yeah, sounds good, Mom." When the doorbell rang later that day, I took a deep breath. I knew the moment had come. My brother would show up with his bags and his entitlement, expecting things to go just like they always had. But this time, he'd find out that things were different, that the key he thought he had didn't work anymore. I opened the door, ready to face him. Jake stood there, a smug smile on his face, and I could see the moment his smile faltered as he reached into his pocket and realized that the key he had wasn't going to help him anymore. Emma," he said, holding up the key. "It's not working." I crossed my arms, looking him in the eye. "I know. You'll have to ring the bell from now on. The old key doesn't work anymore." His face twisted in confusion and frustration, and I could see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't used to not getting what he wanted immediately. "This isn't funny," Jake said, his voice growing tense. "Mom said I could just move in, and now you're changing the locks?" "Yeah," I said coolly. "I am." He stood there for a moment, completely stunned. The usual manipulation, the pleading, the guilt trips, all of it was coming. But I was done. I wasn't going to back down this time. Jake stood frozen in the doorway, staring at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, he just blinked, like he couldn't comprehend what was happening. I could almost see the wheels in his head turning, trying to figure out how to get the situation back under control. But I wasn't going to let him. I wasn't going to be the victim in this anymore. "Are you serious right now?" he said, his voice rising slightly, the frustration clear. "Mom told you I'm moving in. You can't just shut me out." I didn't flinch. "I can do whatever I want in my own home, Jake." His face reddened, and I could see the panic starting to set in. It was like watching a kid lose their toy, and it made me realize how much he had relied on others for everything, Mom and Dad, mostly. But now, he wasn't going to get his way with me. I stepped back, closing the door halfway, not wanting to make a scene in the hallway. But before I could fully close it, he shoved his foot in the gap, stopping me from shutting him out completely. "Don't do this. I have nowhere else to go." His voice had lost its earlier confidence and now carried desperation. "I'm sorry, Jake, but that's not my problem," I said calmly, feeling my heart pound in my chest, but forcing myself to stay steady. "I told Mom I'm not okay with this. I told her I wasn't ready to have you here. You need to figure it out." His foot jammed further in the gap, and he pushed a little harder, trying to open the door. But I didn't budge. I wasn't giving in. "Come on, just let me in." Jake's voice wavered now, no longer demanding but pleading. "Mom will be mad if you don't. You know how she gets. She'll make everything worse for both of us." I could feel the guilt creeping in, like it always did when he played the victim card. He was good at that. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for it. "I don't care," I said firmly, looking him dead in the eyes. "You've always had someone to bail you out, but not anymore. Figure it out. Find somewhere else to stay." I watched as Jake's face twisted, a mixture of anger and helplessness flashing in his eyes. He couldn't believe I was actually doing this. It was like he couldn't understand that I'd finally set a boundary. For years, I had let him walk all over me, and now that I was taking control of my own life, he couldn't accept it. "Fine," he spat, his voice low, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You'll regret this, Emma. You always do." I didn't flinch. "You'll be fine, Jake. You always are." Without another word, I finally closed the door. The sound of it clicking shut felt like the last barrier between my past and the new life I was trying to build. I leaned back against the door, my pulse still racing. The tension in my body didn't ease right away, but I knew I had done the right thing. I could hear him outside for a few minutes, pacing back and forth in the hallway, muttering to himself. I stayed inside, letting the quiet settle around me, trying to gather my thoughts. Mom called me an hour later. I let it ring 3 times before I finally picked up. "Sweetie, what's going on? Jake said you shut him out? You can't just lock him out of your apartment like that." I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath before speaking. "He's not moving in, Mom. I told you I wasn't okay with it." "Emma, don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice sharp. "You're being unreasonable. He needs help. He's your brother." I could hear her getting worked up on the other end, but I wasn't going to back down now. "I don't care," I said, my voice steady. "He's an adult, and he can figure it out. I'm not just going to let him walk all over me anymore. You don't get to make decisions about my life without even asking me. If he needs help, he can figure it out somewhere else." Mom was silent for a moment, the tension between us growing. "You're being selfish," she finally said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "What happened to being a family? He's your brother. You're supposed to help him when he's in trouble." "I've helped him for years, Mom," I snapped. "I've done more than enough. But I can't keep sacrificing my own peace for him." "You're making a mistake, Emma," she said quietly, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. "You're making him feel like he's not welcome, and that's not what family does." I rubbed my temple, feeling the headache starting to build. Maybe he needs to feel that way for once. Maybe it's time he learns that he can't always rely on others to fix his problems. He needs to grow up. The line went quiet again, but I could still hear Mom breathing heavily, the tension on the other side of the phone almost palpable. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight. "Do what you want, Emma. But don't expect me to be happy about it." With that, she hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment before setting it down on the counter. I had just cut off the last string of control my family had over me. There was no going back now. Jake wouldn't just move in and ruin my life like before. I had to hold my ground. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. There was more to come. Jake wouldn't let this go easily. And Mom? She'd probably keep calling me selfish until the end of time. But I didn't care anymore. I couldn't. I just needed to get through this, and then maybe I could start living the life I'd always wanted. A life where I wasn't always the one who had to fix everything. The days that followed were a mix of tense silence and uneasy phone calls. Jake didn't call me after the door incident, but I could feel his presence in the air, hovering like a storm cloud ready to break. I thought I had made the right decision by standing my ground, but there was a nagging feeling in my gut. I knew my brother too well. If I thought he was just going to accept this and move on, I was wrong. It was a Wednesday evening when the first sign of trouble came. I had just returned home from work, still feeling the weight of the argument with Mom. The apartment was quiet, and I figured it would be a calm night. But as I walked to my door, I noticed something strange, a piece of paper wedged under the door. My heart skipped a beat as I bent down to pick it up, unfolding it carefully. It was a note from Jake. "You don't get to just shut me out, Emma. I'll get in. You can't keep me out forever. The door's not the only way in. See you soon. Jay." I stood there, staring at the paper in disbelief. My mind raced, processing the words. I had changed the locks. There was no way he could get in without a key. But this felt like a warning. It was like Jake wasn't just upset, he was escalating. The thought of him trying to break into my apartment made me feel sick. I couldn't let him do this. I couldn't let him make me feel unsafe in my own home. I quickly went to the door, double-checking the lock. It clicked securely, just as it had when I first installed the new one. But the unsettling feeling didn't go away. I felt like I was being watched, my every movement under scrutiny. The note had rattled me more than I cared to admit. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in my living room, keeping the lights low, eyes fixed on the door. I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. Not for my physical safety, but for what Jake might do next. He'd always been able to manipulate everyone around him, including me. But this was different. This time, I wasn't going to let him have the control. The next day, things escalated even further. I was working from home when I heard a loud bang at my door. I froze. It wasn't a knock. It was a slam. I rushed to the peephole, heart hammering in my chest. There he was, Jake, standing in the hallway, holding a crowbar. I couldn't believe it. My mind raced as I watched him jamming the tool into the doorframe, trying to pry the door open. "Jake!" I shouted through the door, my voice shaking but trying to sound firm. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer, just kept pushing the crowbar deeper into the crack, grunting with frustration. I could hear the wood splintering, the sound enough to send a wave of panic through my chest. This wasn't just a temper tantrum anymore. This was an invasion. I backed away from the door, my mind working furiously. What was I supposed to do? Should I call Mom? No, that wouldn't help. This wasn't her problem anymore. It was mine. I grabbed my phone from the table, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. The operator picked up after 2 rings, and I tried to steady my voice. "Hello, I need help," I said, my voice tight. "Someone's trying to break into my apartment. They're using a crowbar on the door. I'm scared." The operator remained calm, asking for my address and reassuring me that the police were on their way. As I waited, I could hear Jake's grunts growing louder, the metal scraping against the doorframe. My heart pounded in my ears, the seconds feeling like hours. I heard him shout, his voice muffled through the door. "You can't do this to me, Emma. You'll regret it. Let me in." My fingers clenched around the phone. "No, "Leave me alone, Jake," I shouted back, my voice trembling with both fear and anger. For a few moments, there was silence. I thought maybe he had given up, but then the banging started again, louder this time. I could hear the door groaning under the pressure, the wood buckling with each strike. He wasn't going to stop until he got in. I backed away, looking around the apartment for something to defend myself with, just in case. The thoughts were swirling in my head. Should I go out the window? Should I lock myself in the bedroom? I had never imagined my own brother would do something like this. My chest tightened with dread, and I found myself paralyzed with uncertainty. Suddenly, I heard sirens in the distance. The sound of police cars getting closer made my heart race with a mix of relief and fear. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep the door intact, and I didn't want Jake to hurt himself, or me, trying to break in. And then, just as the sirens neared, Jake let out a frustrated scream. "I hate you. I can't believe you're doing this to me." His words were punctuated by a final, desperate slam of the crowbar. I heard him step back, and I hesitated, trying to listen for any sound that might indicate he was leaving. But it was too late. The door splintered, a jagged crack running across the middle. Jake had broken through. Before I could react, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. The police had arrived. "Police, step away from the door," a voice commanded. My heart leapt at the sound of the officers. Jake froze, his face turning pale as he realized what was happening. I could hear his breathing pick up, his eyes shifting nervously between the door and the officers. "Get back," one of the officers shouted. "Drop the crowbar." Jake dropped it immediately, his eyes wide with fear. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to move. My emotions were a jumbled mess of shock, relief, and disbelief at what had just transpired. My brother was still out there, his anger still smoldering, and I had no idea what would happen next. The officers moved in quickly, cuffing Jake and pulling him away from the door. He struggled, but they were fast, and within moments, they had him restrained. I stood there, my breath coming in shallow gasps, trying to process everything. I had never imagined that it would come to this. The reality of the situation was sinking in. Jake had truly crossed a line, and I was no longer the one who could fix things for him. One of the officers knocked gently on my door and entered, giving me a reassuring glance. "We've got him. You're safe now." But even as I nodded in relief, a part of me felt a strange emptiness. I had lost my brother, and I wasn't sure if I would ever get him back. "Are you okay?" the officer asked, noticing the shock on my face. I took a deep breath, trying to hold it together. "I will be," I said quietly. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The police took Jake away in the back of their squad car, the sound of the engine fading as they drove off. My heart was still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly wearing off. I felt like I was in some sort of surreal dream. My brother, the one I grew up with, the one I had always defended, had just tried to break into my apartment, my home, like a stranger. And I had to call the police on him. The officer who had been speaking to me, Officer Martinez, gave me a kind, understanding look as he stepped inside the apartment. "You've got a right to be shaken up," he said softly. "If you want, we can stay a little longer. Make sure you're all right." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "No, I'm okay. Thank you, though. I just need some time to process this." He nodded and placed a business card on the table. "Here's my number, just in case you need anything. If Jake contacts you or shows up again, call us immediately." I took the card with a nod, my fingers numb as I held it. "Thank you," I said again, my voice quiet, unsure of what else to say. After Officer Martinez left, I was alone. The apartment felt eerily quiet, the air thick with the weight of everything that had just happened. I walked through the living room, running my fingers along the edge of the table, not quite sure what to do next. My life had been turned upside down, and I wasn't sure how to fix any of it. I had always thought that, no matter what, family was supposed to come first. But after what Jake had done, I realized how wrong I had been. It wasn't just about family, it was about respect, trust, and boundaries. Jake had crossed all of those lines, and I didn't know if there was a way back from this. The phone rang on the coffee table, and I jumped. My stomach twisted as I saw the caller ID. It was Mom. I didn't want to answer, but I knew I had to. With a deep breath, I picked up. "Emma," she said, her voice strained and anxious. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer. "I'm fine, Mom. Physically, at least." My voice wavered as I added, "But Jake." He tried to break into my apartment. I could hear her silence on the other end, followed by a soft sigh. I don't know what's gotten into him. He's been so angry lately. But I never thought it would come to this. I'm so sorry, Emma. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I've tried, Mom. I've tried to help him, but I can't do it anymore. He crossed a line, and I can't let him think this is okay. I heard a faint sniffle on the other end. I understand. I'm just so worried about him. He's my son, and I don't know how to fix him. He needs help, Emma. I bit my lip, feeling the weight of her words. I know he does, but I can't be the one to fix him anymore, Mom. I can't let him keep treating me like this. There was a long pause. I could hear Mom's breath hitching, like she was trying to hold back tears. I know you can't, but he's still your brother. I closed my eyes, the words stinging more than I expected. He's not the person I grew up with anymore, Mom, and I don't know if I can ever trust him again. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and I could feel the gap growing between us. I'm sorry, Emma, she finally said, her voice small. I'm sorry he did this to you. I'm sorry, too, I whispered, my own tears threatening to fall. But I need some space. I need some time to think. I understand, she said softly, her voice breaking. I love you, Emma. We'll get through this. I promise. I hung up, feeling the weight of the conversation settle deep in my chest. I wasn't sure if things would ever go back to normal. I wasn't sure if I even wanted them to. The next few days were a blur. Jake's arrest was the talk of the family, but there was little support or comfort for me. Mom had tried to call several times, but I didn't have the energy to talk to her. I was too hurt, too confused. And deep down, I was scared. I didn't know what Jake was going to do once he got out of jail. What if he came after me again? I stayed in my apartment, keeping the blinds closed and the doors locked. Every time I heard a car pull up outside, my heart raced, wondering if it was Jake. But nothing happened. Days passed, and then a week. The silence was almost as deafening as the confrontation itself. Then, on the 8th day, I got a message from Jake. It was simple. I'm sorry, Emma. I messed up. I just didn't know how else to deal with everything. I was angry. Please, can we talk? I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to block him and move on with my life. But another part of me, one that still remembered the brother I once had, felt a pang of sympathy. I sat there for what felt like hours, the message flashing on my phone screen. And in the end, I decided to respond. Not with forgiveness, but with boundaries. You hurt me, Jake, and I can't let that go. You need help, but I can't fix you. I'm not your punching bag anymore. If you really want to make things right, start by getting the help you need. Until then, I can't talk to you. I hit send and set the phone down, feeling a strange sense of peace. It wasn't resolution. It wasn't closure. But it was the first step in healing. For both of us. And with that, I closed the door on that chapter of my life for good.